Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really interesting piece of the Hebrew Bible, 2 Chronicles chapter 31.
Right. So if you've been following the story, King Hezekiah has just led these major religious reforms. Think temple cleansing, Passover celebration, big stuff.
Yeah, a real whirlwind. And this chapter 31, it's kind of the what happens next.
Exactly. The dust settles from the big events, and now it's about the practical side. How did people actually respond across the land? How do you sustain this renewed worship?
And crucially, how do you support the people, the priests and Levites who are now dedicated full-time to this?
It gets into the nuts and bolts, the logistics of making that spiritual renewal stick.
Okay, so where does it kick things off? The text says, when all this had ended, referring to those earlier reforms, the Israelites didn't just go home.
No, they went out actively across the land.
What were they doing?
Well, they were on a mission, really. Smashing sacred stones, cutting down Asherah poles.
These are the symbols of idolatry, right? The forbidden worship.
Absolutely. Things deeply embedded in the culture. So destroying them was a very physical, very public statement, rejecting the old ways.
And this wasn't just around Jerusalem.
Not at all. The text makes a point of saying it was throughout Judah and Benjamin, but also in Ephraim and Manasseh.
So reaching into the northern territories, too, even areas from the old northern kingdom.
That's right. It suggests a really widespread, comprehensive effort to cleanse the land of these illicit sites, a unified push almost.
Wow. So you picture this wave of activity dismantling these things everywhere, and then it says they return to their towns.
Yeah, the order seems important. Deal with the outward symbols first, purify the land, then settle back into daily life and figure out the internal structure.
Okay, so the land is cleansed. What's next for structuring the worship itself? Hezekiah steps back in.
He does. The focus shifts to organizing the personnel. Hezekiah assigned the priests and Levites to divisions.
Divisions, so like specific teams.
Sort of. It says each of them according to their duties as priests or Levites. So, assigning roles for burnt offerings, fellowship offerings, ministering, giving thanks, singing praises.
Ah, okay. So bringing order back, not just a random collection of people, but specific jobs, probably on rotation.
Exactly. Restoring the structure laid out in the law for how temple service should function, bringing back, professional standards to this sacred work.
And it mentions this happened at the gates of the Lord's dwelling.
Right at the temple complex, underscoring that this is part of the formal restoration of its functions.
Okay, so land cleansed, roles defined. But you mentioned the practical side. These priests and Levites, this is their job now, full time.
Yeah.
How do they eat? How do they support their families?
That's the million-shekel question, isn't it? And this is where the chapter gets really practical about funding. It starts with the king himself.
Hezekiah, what did he do?
He contributed from his own possessions.
From his personal wealth? Wow.
Yeah, it's a big statement. He's not just telling others what to do. He's leading by example, putting his own resources on the line.
And what did his contribution cover specifically?
The text says it was for the regular required stuff, the morning and evening burnt offerings, and the special offerings for Sabbaths, new moons, and appointed feasts. Basically, the core operational costs, all mandated as written in the law of the Lord.
So the king ensures the baseline temple operations are funded. But that doesn't cover the living expenses for all the staff, does it?
No, probably not for the hundreds, maybe thousands involved. So Hezekiah then turns to the people.
What does he do?
He issues an order. He ordered the people living in Jerusalem to give the portion due the priests and Levites.
An order, not a request, reminding them of their obligation under the law.
Precisely. And the reason given is so important. Why do they need this portion?
Tell us.
The text explicitly says, so they could devote themselves to the law of the Lord.
Ah. So the support enables their full-time focus on ministry, on teaching, on the temple service itself.
Exactly. It draws a direct line between financial support from the community and the ability of the religious leaders to do their jobs properly. You need one for the other.
Okay, so the king orders the people in Jerusalem to contribute. How does that go down?
It's fascinating. The response is immediate and huge.
Really? No grumbling?
None mentioned. It says, as soon as the order went out, the Israelites generously gave. They didn't just comply, they were generous.
What did they give?
The best stuff. The first fruits of their grain, new wine, oil, and honey, and all that the fields produced. The first and best part of the harvest.
The first fruits. That's significant. And was it just a little bit?
Far from it. It says they brought a great amount, a tithe of everything.
Tithe, a tenth, on top of the first fruits.
Seems so. a tenth of everything they produced. It points to a remarkable level of buy-in, of faith in this whole restored system. Real enthusiasm.
And was this just people in the capital?
No, it spread. The text adds that the men of Israel and Judah who lived in the towns of Judah also brought a tithe of their herds and flocks.
So farmers, herdsmen, people across the country are participating.
Yes, and also a tithe of the holy things dedicated to the Lord their God. So consecrated items, too. It was a nationwide outpouring.
And the description of how much came in, that image is really vivid.
It really is. It says they piled them in heaps.
Heaps, like literal mounds of grain, produce, wineskins.
Exactly. You can just picture it. Mountains of goods accumulating at the temple, a visual symbol of this incredible generosity.
That's amazing. And it wasn't just a one-off collection day.
No, the text gives a time frame. They began doing this in the 3rd month and finished in the 7th month.
So over several months. Harvest season, right?
Makes sense. A steady stream of contributions coming in for months, building up these massive heaps.
Okay, picture this. Hezekiah and his officials turn up at the temple and see these heaps. What's their reaction?
Pure gratitude, it seems. When Hezekiah and his officials came and saw the heaps, they praised the Lord and blessed his people Israel.
So acknowledging God first, then the people's faithfulness.
Right. Recognizing the blessing came from God, and the people responded faithfully to that blessing.
And Hezekiah, always the practical leader, asks, what?
He asks the priests and Levites, where did all this come from? What's going on here?
Makes sense. And who answers him?
Azariah, the chief priest, from the line of Zadok, a significant figure. And his answer is really insightful.
What does Azariah say?
He basically says, look, since the people began to bring their contributions, we have had enough to eat and plenty to spare.
Enough to eat and plenty to spare, not just scraping by.
No, overflowing abundance. And he connects it directly. Because the Lord has blessed his people and this great amount is left over.
So faithfulness led to God's blessing, which resulted in this surplus. They saw the direct link.
They absolutely did. It wasn't just random good fortune. It was a consequence of obedience and divine favor.
So faced with this surplus problem, which is a good problem to have, what does Hezekiah do? You can't just leave food piled up.
Right. Practicality kicks in again. He gave orders to prepare storerooms in the temple of the Lord.
Building storage space.
Exactly. Infrastructure to handle the inflow. And it says this was done. They built them.
And
then the text notes, they faithfully brought in the contributions, tithes, and dedicated gifts into these newly prepared storerooms.
So the initial heaps were spontaneous, but the ongoing system needed organization. Store it properly.
Precisely. It moves from that first wave of enthusiasm to setting up a sustainable, managed process. And that management needed specific people.
Okay, so who's put in charge of managing all these incoming goods? This sounds like a huge job.
It was. And the chapter actually names names, which shows how structured it became. A Levite named Conaniah was put in charge of these things, overall manager.
And did he have help?
Yes. His brother Shimei was next in rank, his second in command. A clear hierarchy.
Any others mentioned?
Oh, yeah. A whole team of supervisors under them.
Yeah.
Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Ashel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Ismachiah, Mahath, Benaiah. 10 supervisors.
Wow, quite the management team.
And it wasn't just an internal temple appointment. The text stresses they were appointed by appointment of King Hezekiah and Azariah, the official in charge of the temple of God.
So, joint oversight, royal and religious authority working together.
Shows how seriously they took the proper handling of these resources. Accountability was key.
Okay, that covers managing the inflow and storage. But what about getting it out? The distribution to the priests and Levites.
Another crucial role, and another specific appointment. Korhe, son of Imnah, another Levite, the keeper of the East Gate, interestingly, was put in charge of distribution.
His job was
This ensuring the portions reached the people they were intended for.
Did he have a team too?
He did. Eden, Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah assisted him faithfully in the towns of the priests.
In the town, so not just distributing at the temple in Jerusalem.
Right. They set up a network to get the provisions out to where the priestly and Levite families actually lived. A distribution network.
That's quite sophisticated.
Yeah.
How did they decide who got what? What was the basis for distribution?
The text outlines a really thorough system. It was done to their fellow priests according to their divisions.
Okay, so tied to their service roles.
Yes, and old and young alike. inclusive of everyone involved in service, regardless of age.
Did it just cover the men actively serving?
No, this is where it gets remarkably comprehensive. It included males 3 years old or more listed in the genealogies.
3 years old. Why so young?
Well, presumably recognizing they were part of the priestly Levitical families and would eventually serve, it's supporting the entire lineage dedicated to service.
Okay.
It also, of course, provided for the established priests enrolled by family and the Levites 20 years or older, the main workforce, you could say, according to their specific jobs and responsibilities.
And then there's the part about families.
Yes, this is really striking. Provision was made for all the little ones, the wives, and the sons and daughters of the whole community listed in these genealogical records.
So the support extended to the entire family unit, not just the person performing the duties.
Exactly. And the reason given is beautiful, for they were faithful in consecrating themselves.
Their identity itself was consecrated, set apart for God's service. So the whole family was supported as part of that reality.
It's a profound idea, supporting the whole ecosystem of dedicated service.
And they made sure to reach everyone, even those living further out.
They did. It mentions specifically appointing men to handle distribution for priests living on farmlands or in other towns, ensuring every male among them and to all who were recorded in the genealogies of the Levites received their portion.
Incredible thoroughness. No one left out. It speaks volumes about the commitment to fairness and making sure the system actually worked for everyone it was meant to support.
Absolutely. It shows the restoration was practical, sustainable, and cared for the human element. It wasn't just about rituals, it was about people.
So, stepping back from all these logistical details, the cleansing, organizing roles, the amazing generosity, managing the surplus, this detailed distribution, how does the chapter sum up Hezekiah's role in all this?
It gives a really clear verdict on his leadership during this time. It says, this is what Hezekiah did throughout Judah, doing what was good and right and faithful before the Lord his God.
High praise. Good, right, and faithful. And does it say how he managed that? What was his approach?
Yes, and this is maybe the core takeaway about Hezekiah here. In everything that he undertook in the service of God's temple and in obedience to the law and the commands, he sought his God and worked wholeheartedly.
Sought his God and worked wholeheartedly. That combination feels key.
It really does. Sought his God points to his motivation, his reliance on divine guidance, faith-driven leadership.
And worked wholeheartedly.
That speaks to his effort. Complete commitment, energy, sincerity, no half measures. He was all in.
And the outcome, the result of this approach.
The text states it very simply, and so he prospered.
He prospered. A direct link between seeking God, working with full commitment, and achieving success.
And that prosperity, in the context of this chapter, isn't just about Hezekiah personally getting rich. It's the success of the whole project. The system worked, the people were provided for, the worship was restored and sustained. That's the prosperity.
Right. It all came together because of that combination of faith and intense effort, starting from the top.
It's a powerful model presented in the text.
So wrapping up this deep dive into 2 Chronicles 31, we've seen this incredible sequence. Radical cleansing, careful organization, overwhelming generosity leading to surplus, meticulous management and distribution, all under a leader defined by seeking God and wholehearted work.
A really full picture of reform taking root and becoming functional.
And thinking about the insights for you, listening in, this chapter really lays out a pattern, doesn't it? Seeking God, working wholeheartedly, and the resulting prosperity or success. What does Hezekiah's example make you think about regarding the connection between your own convictions, your effort, and the outcomes you see? Whether it's in your work, your community, your service, what might it look like for you to work wholeheartedly in something you believe in? And based on this chapter, what kind of results might that dedicated, faith-informed effort potentially yield? Something to think about.